Hello, everyone. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to have you here again this week. I'll just say we're having some technical difficulties with the streaming today, but if we are, if this does go out on the live stream, we often do put some links in the stream chat so that you can join how you like and come on in here to the Zoom call and have part of the conversation here. But regardless, it's great to have everyone here in the Zoom room, and we will introduce today's guest as well as the show very soon. And I'll pull up that info and make sure we get our context straight. By the way, guys, if you want to participate in the conversation, fine. You can write notes in the chat, questions, things like that. If you're in the Zoom call, if you got something interesting to say, we might bring you on audio, video if you want to as well. No pressure. But if you do have something to say, go ahead and speak up. All right, let's talk about what we're doing today. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and we gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable people in the piano world. And this includes manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, players of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. It's an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Today's episode features Scott Laird. I want to give an intro to Scott here. He is an education specialist with Diodario Strings and NS Design Violins. Scott is redefining the way strings are taught and played, blending traditional techniques with cutting-edge electric violin technology. His work has transformed music education by bridging the old with the new. Scott is the Fine Arts Chair at the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, where he leads the school's orchestra to top national rankings recognized by the American String Teachers Association and the North Carolina Symphony. Scott is also an accomplished electric violinist who has performed with artists across genres, including the progressive metal band Believer. Hey, welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks. It's great to be with you today, and thanks to everybody who's joining us.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for being here. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. Like as I mentioned, I was having some issues with the stream, but we're here now. So, Scott, we always like to roll back the sands of time, if that's a mixed metaphor. I don't know. The mixed. You saying it's a mixed metaphor is a mixed thing. My brain's
sounds like the old
today.
introduction to Days of Our Lives, I think.
I'll tell you what. I've been fasting for a few days actually, and it feels great. And I find when I'm fasting, I'm usually pretty mentally sharp. But I'm wondering, it's making my brain go a little bit haywire. Anyways, I want to talk about how this all got started for you. How'd you get into music in the first place? And it's always fun to hear about how it actually led to a career in the arts.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm really, really happy to spend a little time with you this afternoon. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I grew up in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is a small university town near Pittsburgh in the rolling hills of Western PA. And I'm the son of educators. My dad was school superintendent in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and my mom was an English teacher in a nearby school system. And from the very time I can remember, my sisters and I were interested in music. And my parents are not musicians at all. We would go to church and sing loud at church, or we would go camping and sing around the campfire. My dad had an old K guitar, a K archtop guitar that he would play chords on, and we would sing Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road and stuff like that back in the 70s.
Nice.
But my life changed when in first grade, my first grade teacher, I still remember her name, it was Miss Rothera. She told the class that she had played the violin when she was in high school. And I went home and I told my mom and dad, Miss Rothera played the violin, I want to play the violin. And I can almost remember my dad saying no immediately. He was sort of a country boy, and I sort of got the impression that I was going to be playing football, not the violin. from him, and it sort of went away for a little bit. But my dad's best friends were the school administrators in the school, and we were having dinner at my principal's house later that week, and his son and I were down in their basement, and we found an old violin. And I came tearing up the stairs with this violin. Mom, Dad, look at this violin. I have to learn how to play this. Mr. McFarland, my principal, played the violin when he was a kid. And my dad and my principal had a little conversation, and sure enough, it was okay for your son to play the violin. So I convinced them, and they got me violin lessons very quickly. And in fact, the Indiana, Pennsylvania is a university town. Indiana University of Pennsylvania, State University is right there. And it just so happens that one of our neighbors in our neighborhood had a daughter who was a grad student as a violin performance major at the time. Her name was Heidi Peterson. Eventually, she ended up in the Dallas Symphony. Heidi Itashiki was her name. She's deceased now, but she, as a grad student, took me on as a private violin student when I was just 6 years old. And in the ensuing years, my older sister started playing the cello, and my younger sister started playing the violin. We just became sort of a music family. And even though my parents weren't musicians, they understood the value of music education. They understood the way it stretched us aesthetically, artistically, in every ways. We learned through the Suzuki method, if you're familiar with that, back in the 70s. This would have been 1971. And it just became our family thing. It's what we did. And by the time I was 8, I was taking piano lessons with a lovely sort of grandmotherly figure in my life in Indiana, Pennsylvania. But the violin was my thing. It's what I cared about. It's what I did the most, and I was good at it. I started early, and I got good pretty quickly. But my life as a musician and through middle school and high school was pretty eclectic. I played the violin. I went to lots of youth orchestras, took private lessons, studied piano. I will say that at the time was a little bit of a secondary thing. And then I started playing bass guitar as a 7th grader, and played bass guitar in the school jazz band and in rock bands in my hometown. But my life changed, really sort of trying to stay a little bit with the piano theme of today. My life really changed when I was about 15 years old. There was a guy in our town who was a little older than my older sister, had gone to University of Michigan to study music composition and theory. And it was summertime, and I was sort of kicking around, and my parents, I was starting to talk about being a music major, and my parents asked him if he would teach me music theory lessons. And I would go to, his name is Jeff McGee. I would go to Jeff's house, and he really taught me music theory from the keyboard. And honestly, it changed my life. It opened up the keyboard as a tool for creativity in a way that my traditional piano lessons hadn't really done for me. I was, learning Bach and, standard piano repertoire in my other lessons, but this allowed me to understand the circle of fifths. It allowed me to understand inversions of chords, and ultimately my creative juices started to flow through this music theory / piano instruction. And I started writing music at that time. And so, the simplest of pop songs, the simplest of rock songs from the piano, but I found a creative outlet that was so different than learning the, high level repertoire that I was working on in the violin. And I can remember distinctly going back to school my junior year of high school, and there was a talent show pretty quickly in the school year. And I played a song that I had written sitting at the piano at this talent show. And the feedback I got from my friends, from my peers, was amazing. Suddenly I was doing something that was really unique. It was all mine. And it's sort of, I'm not exaggerating when I say it changed my life, because now I was known not only as the kid who could play the violin, but as the singer-songwriter, the creative guy that could do these things. Mm-hmm. So really, when I went to college in my hometown at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, I went thinking I would end up getting a degree in music education, but probably sticking with the performance side and writing songs and I used to say I wanted to be Billy Joel, and through my college time, my 4 years of undergrad, though, I had a professor who really encouraged me as a teacher. He saw me leading some rehearsals and saw the way I thought about developing ensemble and saw the way I thought about putting a score together with a group of people. Um, Still playing the bass guitar a lot, still playing the piano a lot, but majoring in violin and music ed. And this particular professor, Dr. John Keene, just really encouraged me and said, "Come, come, let me show you what this can be in terms of a career in music education." And I believed him, and I started working with him very closely my last couple of years of college, and and then I was off and running. I will say also the other piece of my upbringing that really made a huge difference for me was playing in honor orchestras in Pennsylvania. Uh, all over the country, there is a great network through NAFME, the National Association for Music Ed, and by extension, each state MEA has these wonderful regional and district wide and regional wide and all state orchestras, which I got to participate in. And those two were life changing for me because as I sat in the violin section and learning the repertoire and playing in that section, throughout my high school career, I fell in love with ensemble. I fell in love with what it feels like to play as part of a group, to hear and feel how one person, a conductor, can shape and mold, 150 individual musicians into something that it's so much greater than the individual parts. And so through all of these experiences, I sort of put in my mind, boy, I want to be a conductor. And most clearly, I wanted to conduct honors orchestras of high school kids. That's what I wanted to do. And I can tell you more about that as we go, as we talk about my life and my career. But I will tell you full circle that in 1983, I played in the Pennsylvania All-State Orchestra. And just this past April, I conducted the Pennsylvania All-State Orchestra. And it was sort of a homecoming of sorts and a real full circle event and something I dreamed about when I was a teenager and came to fruition here in my later years of my career.
Well, thanks for all the background. I mean, it's interesting to hear you talk about your childhood experience, and through grade school and high school and all of these things, given the fact that, that's one of your central focuses right now is, youth education. So I think that is, very appropriate to talk through all that and learn more about what you're doing. I know that in particular, well, let's compare and contrast, or let's sort of connect the two things, right? When you're doing your job, which you'll explain a little bit as a preface, how do you think about that in terms of where you came from and what your music education was?
So that's a great question and one I don't think I've ever been asked before. So thanks. Uh, well, let me tell you a little bit about what I do today and
Yeah.
where I do it now. And I'll give you a sort of an abridged, and maybe we'll come back to that a little bit more. But for the last 25 years, I have been the orchestra director and music instructor at the North Carolina School of Science and Math, which is it's a public resident high school in Durham, North Carolina. So our school is for 11th and 12th graders from across the state of North Carolina. We are actually part of the university system. So our school is one of the 17 constituent institutions of the University of North Carolina, but we serve only high school students, 11th and 12th graders. We have on our Durham campus, we have 680 students. On our Morganton campus, we have 300 students. So just about 1,000 kids. They all live residentially on our campuses. They come from all across the state of North Carolina. Nobody pays a nickel in tuition, no room, no board. It's free. It's completely funded by the state of North Carolina. And every student who matriculates from our school is automatically admitted to any state university in North Carolina and receives a full tuition waiver. So this
Wow.
is a
Amazing.
highly endowed and supported financially endeavor by the state of North Carolina. And as you can imagine, it's highly competitive to get into the school. And think about the brightest kids in any school system, they're usually involved in the arts in some way. And so our school and really my 25 years at the school has been focused on providing the highest quality music experience, particularly orchestral experiences for the students that come to our school. And in recent years, I've become chair of fine arts for both of our campuses. So by extension, now I'm overseeing faculty members that are singularly focused on providing the highest quality arts opportunities for kids who are living away from their moms and dads, away from their hometown, their friends, and they come to our school, make new friends, and we want to keep their arts activities as part of their lives. It enriches their lives, it makes their lives better, and we believe strongly that it's part of their wellness, their overall wellness, whether it's aesthetic wellness, intellectual wellness, or just keeping something going that they've spent time doing and making our school better as well. So I think that the big factors here are these are bright kids and they're doing the arts at a very high level. And
Oh,
so to answer your question about my life, I think the parallel is that my parents knew that I and my sisters we were academic kids. We were top academics at our school and had a great community of friends along those lines. But when we expressed an interest in the arts, my parents, as educators, understood that, well, we want to support that. And I would say they intuited the value of arts to the intellectual and emotional and aesthetic development of their children in a way that maybe they didn't have opportunities as when they were kids. Because this thing, classical music to my parents was a real unknown. They didn't understand it at all. And honestly, when I started getting involved in rock music or jazz bands and jazz music or you name it, I don't think my parents are self-identified sock hoppers, from the 50s. And so they understood that. My dad liked Tennessee Ernie Ford, but we started playing Bach and and Vivaldi at home, and it wasn't something he had much experience with. I will tell you that now they've spent a lifetime supporting their 3 kids and now lots of grandchildren who are professional and amateur musicians. And my parents are very good judges of good music and very eclectic in their music interests. But the parallel I think for me is supporting. I was always supported in my music endeavors by my parents in ways. I'll give you an example. When I was about 13 years old and ready for a full-size instrument, my parents, who were pretty conservative fiscally, were willing to invest a pretty big chunk of money into a really good violin for this 13-year-old kid to play. And then when I expressed a little interest in having a bass guitar, they were willing to help me with that, or a drum set, or a mandolin, and really a lot of my eclectic nature as a musician is because when I came home with some harebrained idea about a new instrument I needed, my parents would usually support that because I think they saw it as really vital to my personal and academic development and recreation in a lot of ways. And the same for my sisters as well. The other thing is when you're a music student in high school, when I was a music student in high school, it was a real identity for me. All of my best friends were the kind of the star athletes in our school. And without going into too many details, I had a bone condition in my left arm that sort of kept me out of contact sports. So in Western Pennsylvania, if you're not playing football, you're sort of a second class kid in the 70s. And I desperately wanted to be on the football field, but I wasn't going to get there. It wasn't going to happen. My parents funneled me into music because they knew there was an identity and a social group. And I had at the time so many friends around music. And in fact, when I'd go to these honor orchestras or wrote music on the piano or whatever, these were social vehicles for me. And they were ways for me to kind of go, I knew when I'd go to an honors orchestra that I played well enough that I was going to make friends, guys, girls, people from other towns. And I still have some of the same friends that I had in high school that I met at district orchestra festivals or honor orchestra festivals or through my high school's music program. And I was sort of known as the music guy. And it gave me some social stature that I might not have had otherwise. And I ended up being president of my high school class. And a lot of that was because of the opportunities I really had, or doors that were opened, because I was a good musician and I was eclectic. I could do a lot of different things. I could play pop music or rock music or classical music and sort of fit into a lot of circles. So this music education for me was it was critical to my
Mhm.
development as a human being.
Yeah.
Um, so and I had great teachers as well. And these teachers, I always say my violin teachers probably had more impact on me than any other people outside of my parents.
That's great. And in terms of the school that you're at, so it's primarily a school for science and mathematics, right? That's like the
Yeah.
focus of the curriculum and what's there. And you said there's probably on the order of what is it, 1,000 or 2,000 students or
About a
something?
thousand students between the two residential
Two
campuses.
residential campuses. And then and what percentage of those students are involved, musically? I mean, maybe they're all taking a music class or maybe not, or are they doing orchestra or what kind of stuff is going on there?
One of the things I'm really proud about at this school is that all music is not required. The arts are not required at our school. The arts are all pure electives at our school, which what we're really meaning by that is the arts curriculum is over and above the full academic curriculum. So in a traditional public school, if you want to take orchestra or band, um, you might have to give up one of your academic class
Yeah,
periods to do
yeah.
that. But at our school, you don't. In fact, my orchestra meets in the evenings from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays is when my orchestra rehearses. What's cool about that is it really doesn't impact the kids' academic schedule at all, and we get the kids that really want to be in the orchestra and value that. So you asked about numbers. I'd say about between a third and a half of the student body takes an arts class, either visual arts, music, or theater,
Mm.
at some point in their time at our school. And about, I'm going to do a little bit of quick math, about a third take a music class at some point in their time there. So um, we have on our Durham campus, we have about 70 students in our wind ensemble, the band.
Oh
We
wow.
have about 50 students in our orchestra, the string orchestra. We have a chorus. We have a jazz ensemble, and then a number of electives. We teach a piano elective, which I brought to the campus when I came 25 years ago. I brought my piano curriculum and concepts of teaching piano to the school, which now that I'm in more administration, someone else teaches that class. But I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about my piano and guitar curriculum at this school because it's pretty unique and kind of cool.
Yeah, sure.
Um, so anyway, so that'll give you an idea. So the arts are pretty important at this
Yeah,
school.
that's
When I came,
wonderful.
when I was at a previous institution, Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, outside of DC, um, I taught three orchestras at that school, and then my fourth course in my schedule was a piano and guitar class. When I came to the School of Science and Math in Durham, I loved teaching that class and got me a little different kind of student than the orchestra students. So I brought that the core of that curriculum to NCSSM. What I realized in easily 20 years ago was that I was spending a lot of time teaching the same lesson over and over to different students. In my piano class, we would have students of all kinds of different playing levels, and but a lot of beginners or early players, early intermediates. And so I was repeating myself a lot during the course of a day as I'd move from student to student. So this was very early in the YouTube age, and I was one of the first teachers nationally to flip my classroom and put all of my instructional teaching lessons on YouTube. So I used, and for the entire time that I taught piano there, for my beginners, I would use the Bastian older beginner piano method, which is a war horse, really. But it worked for these 11th graders who were starting piano when they came to me in with
Hmm.
minimal time to take the class. And they could watch my instructional video, learn the piece. I could hear them play it, give them feedback and instruction, and then they could move on. And it became a very efficient way for a class of 20 students all to be playing the piano or guitar simultaneously on different repertoire and learning and moving forward at a very efficient way. And it
Hmm.
really increased the success of our piano students. And
Yeah.
it still gets used to this day at our school. And
Hmm.
if folks search up, I don't know, piano lessons or the various Bastion song titles and my name, they'll
Right.
find it. It's on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah. And is that on your personal channel or is that up on some school
It's on
related
the
channel?
NCSSM Distance
Okay.
Education channel,
Okay. Okay.
which is also, you can search that and find it. Believe it or not, on that channel, which has all kinds of science and math stuff,
Hmm.
the video that has the most hits on our NCSSM channel is me teaching a first day lesson for guitar players who are switching over to bass guitar.
Okay. There
Got a
you go.
couple 100,000 hits on
Yeah.
our science and math channel.
Yeah. The basic stuff is always the most popular. It doesn't make sense when you're haven't done YouTube before and you're sort of good at something. You think, oh, I'm going to do some advanced thing and people are going to love it because it's advanced. But you go, well, the basic stuff, everyone that's the more people get to the basic level. A lot of people don't get to the advanced level, so the
Yeah,
basics always get a lot of attention.
yeah.
We do have a question or a comment coming in. I'm going to go ahead and read it out here. So from Johann Krebs, he says, "What a forward-looking government you have! I remember being in what used to be communist East Germany. The government there also had a vision involving the arts. All adults in the country were forced through the unions in their workplaces to attend concerts, opera, theater, dance, etc., through their working lives. They called it continuing adult education, which was obligatory. The result was always full houses at intermission times, of which there could be two or three. Members of the audience were offered food, home cooked in the huge theater kitchens, an appetizer like soup. Wow, this is so fascinating. For the first intermission, then an entree like sauerkraut with sausage for third intermission, dessert and coffee. Uh, Everybody sat on long wooden benches at long wooden tables. Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that. I love the idea that people were forced into that, but it actually sounds pretty fun, right?
Can I, I'd like to respond to that. I think it's
Yeah.
worth a little shout out. First of all, thank you for that's some wonderful education there. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I did not know any of that. So I will share that in the 70s, in the 1970s, Governor Hunt, then Governor Hunt of North Carolina, had this vision of starting this kind of a school that would ultimately keep the best and brightest students in North Carolina in the state, and ultimately a little bit of an economic goal of having them be taxpayers in the state, but in the end, he believed that we could create this community of scholarship where kids from the cities, Raleigh or Charlotte, would commingle with kids from the furthest reaches of the state, the mountains in the west or the coast in the east, or wherever those kids were, and rich kids, poor kids, black, white, Native American, Asian kids. It's a very diverse community, racially, socioeconomically, and regionally. Every congressional district in our state receives a quota for students to come. So it's not like it's just kids from Raleigh or just kids
Right.
from Charlotte. So it truly is a diverse environment, and it was really progressive of Governor Hunt to want to do this. And since that time, many states have modeled schools after our school, but ours was the first of its kind nationally. And there was a city block in Durham where there was a hospital, Watts Hospital, which was kind of going. The facility was getting old and the hospital was closed. It was a teaching school for nurses, and ultimately it closed. And then Governor Hunt had the idea of repurposing that city block campus for a school. And so that's what they did. They renovated it, most of it, some of it, and over the years it's been renovated a lot to bring it up to speed. And that was our first campus. And I will just share, to be current in this conversation, that probably about 10 years ago, the state legislature in North Carolina really got excited about creating a second campus of our school because our school is so popular with
Mhm.
taxpayers, with students who go there and so we have way more applicants than we can fit
Of
in
course.
beds. So there was an old school for the deaf in Morganton, North Carolina, that had, in recent years, the enrollment had gone down as hearing impaired students are mainstreamed into traditional public schools more today than they used to be. So there are still students at the school for the deaf, but some of the buildings had gotten in disrepair and whatnot. So the idea was hatched to repurpose that parcel of land for the school's second campus. And I'm very proud of the fact that I've been part of the planning for that campus, the planning of curriculum, the planning of facilities, and a hiring of our faculty out there. So we are currently in our third year of that that school being open. We just graduated our first class last spring. The class of 2024 was the first
Mm.
graduating class from that school with 300 students. And that school has a robust arts curriculum, just like the Durham School does. And actually, I'm driving out to Morganton tomorrow to see their first theatrical production of the year. They're doing a production of The Outsiders. So, and I try to support all of that. Well, I go out for as many music or theater or art events that I possibly can. I travel between Durham and Morganton quite a bit during the course of the school year.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, it's interesting to hear about the background of it, right? Because it's a lot of this, right? It comes down to the government support and planning, and education is so important. I think on trend, the education in this country is not necessary. It needs improvement. So it's good to see. It's good to see these type of things happening.
Can I
Is
share?
it?
Yeah,
Yeah, go
sort
ahead.
of a good little springboard. Our
Yeah,
school, just last week, it was made public that our school has been named the #1 public high school in the United States for the second time in 3 years.
that's incredible.
So we had the honor of that distinction in 2023. We were ranked #2 in 2024, which who knows why. And then we were named #1 public high school again this year. I will say that I often joke that ranking doesn't mean much until or unless you're #1, and then you tell everybody. But it is something that with my long history at the school and some of the impacts that I've been able to make school-wide, both in the arts curriculum, the music curriculum, and just general tenor and culture of the school, and the work with the new school. I'm very proud of that designation, and I'm proud to share that with your listeners. It's something that we work very hard for.
Well, my local high school to beat you guys, but that's fine. No, we have a pretty good high school around here. I hear everybody talking about how great it is, but yeah, you gotta give props where it's deserved.
Yeah.
um, Tell me, I mean, I don't, if there's, is not, I'm sure we could talk about this a lot. We don't, we maybe, you might have a lot to say, you might have a little, it doesn't matter. If not, we move on. But how about this whole idea of, science and math and its relationship to music, right? I mean, is there a different approach there at the school because of the focus on those things? Or, yeah, tell me about that, if anything.
Well, and this is something that I have thought about and studied a great deal over the past 30 years. My previous high school was a STEM school as well. And uh, so yes, I would say that the institution acknowledges the importance of the arts at every level as part of the overall residential curriculum, as part of any student's curriculum. And for many, many years, people have struggled with how to articulate the sort of the scholastic benefits of the arts without undermining the aesthetic benefits of the arts in an institution like ours or in any educational setting. Just a couple of years ago, really, I think at the beginning of COVID, one of our computational science teachers came to me and he said, "Hey, Scott, there's this new model that I'm working on." He was working on with a committee nationally in science education that we're trying to really identify what are the human skills that we're trying to really develop in students so that when they go out into a world that's largely STEM focused, what it's not just knowing how to do biology or how to do chemistry or how to do math. It's
Mhm.
kind of understanding the mindset of these endeavors. So he shared with me a model called the model of computational thinking. And I looked at the model and I got real excited because when I look at computational thinking as an educational model, every element of computational thinking to me fits into arts education broadly and music education specifically. So let me share with you the four pillars of computational thinking.
Mhm.
They are the following. The first one is the art of decomposition. That would be taking something that's very complex and breaking it into similar parts. So when we think about practicing music, I'm going to use music rather than any other art right now because it's what I do every day. But when we think about music, this is how we practice, right? You've got a difficult passage, you either slow it down or make it into an etude or whatever we do, we teach students how to decompose music. If you sit in a rehearsal, that's usually a conductor or instructor having the students decompose things and put it back together. Okay, that's pillar number one. Pillar number two is obvious. It's pattern recognition. So in science, they're saying we want kids to see patterns. Well, we do too. That's all music is, right? It's harmonic patterns and scale patterns and rhythmic patterns and notation patterns. So that's an easy one to identify. We do it every day in every music class. Third, algorithm. Now, algorithm is one that sort of a lot of musicians, their eyes roll back in their head and they go, what's an algorithm? But an algorithm is basically a recipe for success. So we have a Beethoven symphony, and I might say to the kids, okay, we're sight reading today. What's our recipe to get from the sight read today to the performance 2 months from today? And what I want students to glean from my music classes is to be able to create a recipe, a plan, a step by step sequential process for achieving success. Algorithm, it's the third one. The last one is one that I get very passionate about, and that is abstraction. In science, they want students to be able to think abstractly. Okay, how are we going to think about this formula? How are we going to think about this solution to very difficult problems that we have in the world? But I believe strongly that music and the arts, we're asking people to think abstractly every day as well, whether we attach emotions to music or um, I talk a lot in my classes about the essence of music. Like what when we hear a fast passage with lots and lots of notes, what we're really hearing is something that's much simpler in essence. And but when we attach any kind of abstraction to music, that fits into this model. So there's your four pillars, and they all fit for music, and they all fit in this STEM environment. I think they allow us to talk about the importance and value of arts education in the context of a STEM education, decomposition, pattern recognition, abstraction, and algorithm. So I'm spending a lot of time in recent years
Mhm.
speaking on this topic to music educators and science and math educators about how we can speak about this bridging that gap between the arts and the sciences in any curriculum and the importance of the arts in a STEM curriculum.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's interesting. Um, yeah, just going over it. The decomposition side of it. Oh, actually, I had a question. How much do you intentionally, I mean, it sounds like you maybe do because you're talking about it and highlighting it, but as you're working with the students? Do you talk this through with them? Hey, we're abstracting this. This is an algorithm. This is a pattern recognition, or does it just get integrated naturally?
It's a yes and yes. I tend to make it really on the forefront
Mm-hmm.
because I want students to know, oh, we're doing this today, and this is an abstraction, or we're doing this today. This is really decomposing this piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of teacher education as chair. I've really promoted this concept to all of our arts teachers, our theater teachers, our art teachers, our music teachers. I think probably they're incorporating this, excuse me, maybe just a little more subtly into their
Mm-hmm.
classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of in this mode where I'm always trying to make sure the connection is being made because I want my students to come back to me 10 years from now and say, a lot of times high school kids, if any of the audience has had high school students, they sometimes appreciate what you're bringing to the table as an instructor a lot more 5 to 10 years later. Um, I've learned that as a dad, as a
Yeah.
parent.
Mostly they're just thinking about who has a crush on who, and then
Yeah, come
the
on.
stuff kind of gets in there on accident, and then they realize it was useful.
Yeah, and I get that. I have three sons all in their 20s. And so we've just kind of gotten over that hump. And even as a parent, some of these, you know, kind of deeper philosophical ideas that they've heard me talk about year after year after year, but now at age 24, hey dad, now I'm thinking about this. It makes sense.
Hmm.
And so I believe that is the case with our students as well. So I tend to maybe try to make that connection pretty strongly right at the front end.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating context that you have to work with in, you know, I've often heard, we're piano tuners. We go around, we tune people's pianos. We meet a lot of musicians. So I've often heard a pattern where, someone who is musical, ends up being great at computer programming, just incidentally, right? And people talk about, oh, there's some foundation, right? There's all these, there's a buzz, there's scientific research, which we won't go into in detail today, probably, but that says there's some foundation that playing music is good for you, right? As you're talking about this, and for engineering and abstract thinking, all of these things, whether you specify it or not. And I'm thinking through just like computer programming and just the nature of music and how just some little things in there just pop up in here, right? Like one of the fundamental things in computer programming is like a for loop or a loop, right?
Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah,
kind of just a repeat sign, right?
absolutely.
So
And
that's interesting. And you can think about it as, you go from this point to this and you reach this point and there's a loop here. And that's what happens when you're programming. You have some foundational things going on and then the loop happens and then some other things happen after it. Yeah, I sorry, you had a comment?
yeah, well, I think so. These have been things I've thought about for. I've been teaching for 38 years,
Hmm.
and I'm sure some of your listeners will remember in the 90s there was a book that got a lot of attention called The Mozart Effect.
Yeah.
And I believe Dan Campbell was the author. And that was a wonderful book. And a lot of really exceptional anecdotal information about how music and sound affects us physiologically.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it was unfortunate at the time that the general public grabbed a very small piece of that book that was sort of, oh, if your baby listens to Mozart,
I
they're going to
remember
get
that. Yeah,
smart.
that was the thing.
Which which I think, I don't want to make too strong of, sort of like value judgments, but it, for whatever it did to help the world of music education, it also harmed it, I think, to a certain extent, because people, I think, misunderstood that it was a sort of a small bit of a very good book with a lot of interesting stuff in it.
Hmm.
Um, so some of us in music in those years, I was a young teacher at the
That was a
time,
lot
but
of Mozart Mozart albums for babies.
yeah, sold a lot of Mozart albums for babies, but we wrestled with it, and how do we say this? And I think someone like me, I intuited that music got my brain firing in a spectacular way that nothing else that I did academically did. It it was the thing I had to think ahead. I had to play in time. It was physical. It was artistic. It was expressive. There's so many elements of what I was doing. So I knew this makes me a better student. It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better, ultimately a better husband, a better father, all of those things. But how do I articulate this? And then over the years, you know, you have the people that talk about left brain, right brain, or you have all these various different ideas, but all of them weren't really steeped, in my view, fully on like sort of research and really ideas that we can grab onto. But this computational thinking model for me is exceptional because it really seems to articulate a lot of the technical stuff we do in music. I do want to caution our listeners, though, that also music for wellness sake is a vital notion to hold on strongly to. I just read a book recently called Your Brain on Art, which I'm not going to be able, I didn't look up the author's names just today,
Hmm.
but it's two Johns Hopkins researchers who express the value of sound and arts and creativity in the world of emotional wellness and mental health. And I do think we can go too far to either side in the education world. Oh, music only should be valued for its aesthetic and wellness values or its beauty, or music should only be valued for its scholarship capabilities or, you know, brain development kind of stuff. And the fact is, it's both and all. It makes us better. All of the arts make us better human beings. It allows us to appreciate the world around us and interact with the world around us in ways that are inarticulatable, I think. And we can find all these other intellectual benefits from our work in music as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's one thing that I'm not deep into it, but I have some friends are, and I've been in the domain. You know, funding for the arts is down, and as far as I know, getting a grant, for an art piece, or for an artist or a musician or any of these things, it doesn't sound like it's getting any easier as of late. But I think the
Yeah,
point that you make, it's kind of, so clearly the high school that you're at is not an arts school. It is a math and science school, but it is so
yeah,
wonderful to see that they have a highlight on the arts and there's wonderful things going on there. But we need advocates like that, like I think you said it was the governor that had these ideas, right? That also say if we need this arts education, we need arts, and maybe it comes down to Johann's experience where we force people to go to the concert and we feed them sauerkraut and sausages or something. I don't know, but
sounded like a good dinner. I know that.
yeah.
That I would be
Well,
happy with the dinner.
well, it brings up an interesting idea. There are things that are compulsory, right? Like about our society, right? Education is one of those things. You have
Yeah,
to send your kids to school. If you don't, that's basically against the law unless you're sort of doing some bespoke, homeschooling thing.
yeah.
So there are things that we can and do force into the society. And yeah, I don't know what they do in China. There's a place where they're very good at forcing people to do things, but yeah, something to be said for being, the opposite of forcing, or maybe integrated in that, is passion. Somebody with passion and understanding, and maybe there's research involved that they bring to the table, but making it so that these things are integrated more deeply than they have been as of late. I think it's very important. So I
Well,
appreciate you bringing that up.
I think we do want to at our school and broadly as a teacher educator, I want to be a model of all the best of what that is. We want our students to participate in arts for the joy of music making, for the joy of performing. We try to keep some of that pressure that kids feel to give the perfect performance. Try to lighten that up a little bit at our school because it's really not why we're doing what we're doing. We're doing it to enrich lives, and we're hoping that, and we're very good about hiring real artist educators who understand. Our faculty are all doing their art while they're teaching their art. And it's really important to us. And I think our students see that, and they see our passion, and they see our joy. And by extension, teachers in our orbit hopefully get to see some of that as well. And we can be a model for all that's best in an arts curriculum.
Sure. Now I know, so we started a little bit late today because of the streaming issues. So my default would be to go a little bit longer, but I don't know, do you have a little bit of time? So, okay. And then just for the audience here, yeah, maybe we'll go to like 10 after or 15 after or something. We haven't really touched on it at all, but it was kind of how we led the bio, right? So tell me about your work with Diodario strings. Like, is there a lot of time spent there, or how did that come about? What's involved?
Yeah, I'm very deeply involved with D'Addario Strings. D'Addario is the world's largest manufacturer of guitar strings, but they have an orchestral strings division, which I'm involved as an education specialist. I started working with D'Addario back in the early 2000s as part of their clinician program, and my relationship with D'Addario has taken really, it has taken me a lot of places over the years. So I'll frequently do educational conference sessions or teacher workshops with Diodario sponsoring my work, helping take care of my travel or expenses and that kind of thing. I will work with Diodario to create educational videos quite frequently, or uh, give them feedback on product development. We are currently in Diodario really focusing strongly on their a string called the Kaplan of set of strings. It's a brand within the Diodario family of violin strings, which is a really wonderful, warm, and complex violin string that is we're kind of bringing that to the forefront right now. And at the 2025 American String Teachers Association conference, I will be giving a product workshop on that particular brand of strings. And anyway, just a very close
Mhm.
relationship where we're really mutually beneficial. And Diodario has been absolutely instrumental in my work because of the doors that they have helped to open for me through funding of workshops, through funding of travel, through support of developing ideas like this computational thinking idea and the flipped classroom that I mentioned earlier. So it's really been a wonderful relationship that now is probably more than 20 years of working together. So I'm really proud of that relationship. And then you mentioned NS Design electric violins also. NS Design and I have been in relationship for just a few years less than me and Diodario, but it is a company that makes bowed electric strings as well as bass guitars. And in my view, they're just the sort of the creme de la creme of the electric family of bowed instruments. Ned Steinberger is the engineer and designer of those instruments, and he really made his name in the industry back in the 70s and 80s with the Steinberger bass guitar and guitar that the Gibson company now distributes. And Ned started another company called NS Design, and they're just wonderful. And it's a very similar relationship. A lot of research and development, product development that I do with them, and then they support quite a bit of my scholarship and teacher education as well.
That's fascinating. I got a comment here, so I'll read that as well. So Nancy Salmon says, so glad I got home in time to see this discussion articulated my soapbox that I hop on for all my customers, piano tuner. My brother teaches at Brooklyn Tech, PhD chemistry, and directs one of the music groups. I would like to relay this discussion to him, though he is not a member of the master classes. Would this be possible? So I would say, I think so. We were hoping to actually live stream this, and Scott went to the trouble of adding all the information so that we could stream it directly to his channel. So we'll pass along the video to him, and you can go check it out on his channel if you like. And that would just search YouTube for Scott Laird, basically, right? once it's there?
Yeah, YouTube for Scott Laird would be probably the best place, or I'm Orchestra Guy on Twitter, and they could grab me there too, and I'll try to post in both places. Hey, Ethan, I want to mention, I've thought of this, and I know we're getting a little close on time, but we
Hmm.
haven't talked about the pianos at our institution at all.
Go for
And
it. Yeah.
I do want to say this. We've had a very, very close relationship with Ruggiero Piano in Raleigh, North Carolina. Ruggiero's has years ago, over 20 years ago, our school had a relationship with another piano company, another piano brand, and they sort of withdrew some of their small school support. And I found myself early in my time at NCSSM with most of the pianos taken away from the school over the course of a weekend.
Oh no.
And I was stuck. I didn't have the instruments I needed at this school. And I reached out to Ruggiero's, and we started what has now been a 25-year relationship where we've worked very closely with them. Our first piano we purchased from them was an Estonia Grand, which is still at the school. We've been very happy with that instrument. And then we came upon some funding, and we put Yamaha S1 pianos in all of our practice rooms, and uh, ended up getting a Yamaha Grand for our auditorium in recent years that has the disc function, which we're very excited about.
Mhm.
And then when we opened the brand new campus, we outfitted it with all Yamaha pianos as well, a couple of F1s. And we've been so happy with those instruments and the technology around the disc um, uh, concept has been really great. And we're excited about exploring more and more how we can integrate the disc technology into our two campus model. But really, in this forum, it would really be a shame if I didn't have just the chance to say what a close and strong relationship we have had with Ruggiero Pianos. And it's a family owned business in Raleigh, and they're just spectacular.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, in this day and age, a lot of piano stores are kind of consolidating, going out of business even, right? And so, but what that means is the ones that are functional and doing well are rising to the top. And so we're left with some pretty great folks in the remainder there that are around, and that's really great to hear. Um, I will wrap up here pretty soon. You did mention your Twitter and your YouTube. Anything else that you want to highlight for people to go check out or get involved with?
Actually, now that you mention it, um, I, I probably the best place for me to post a video on, and best place for
Hmm.
people to find some of my thoughts, and really over a long period of time, is my blog. My blog is called Thoughts of a String Educator. And I would really encourage folks to go there, because these ideas, many of my ideas about teaching, about the role of music, about how we interact with students, and lots of other things, find their way onto my blog. And I'll definitely post links there for this as well. So my blog is Thoughts of a String Educator. If folks would like to hear a little bit about, or hear some of the ensembles from our school has a YouTube page, which is NCSSM Fine Arts, all one word. And so if they search that, they can come up with our school's stuff there as well. So lots of ways that you can see what we're doing at this school.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I'll outro us here, and then we'll wrap up. So thanks to everyone for joining today, and of course, both you, Scott, and the live audience that we always appreciate that shows up. Um, Piano Tech Radio Hour, of course, is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. This is cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today, if you just signed up individually for this session, you can make your life more convenient. You could subscribe to PTRH at $16 a month. You'll get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You could sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. We've also got a masterclass coming up this month with Robert Estrin, which I'm very excited about. He's a YouTube sensation, been selling piano, probably one of the first people to make it big selling pianos online. But he's also a phenomenal pianist, and educator as well. And he's going to come on and talk to us about his expertise. And so keep an eye out for that. And make sure you sign up for that. Piano Tech Radio Hour, the podcast. That's at pianotechradio.com. We're releasing archival and new episodes every week. And that's a popular podcast that reaches top in the performing arts all over the world. So make sure you subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Check out our blog at Substack, pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com, for articles that go into the in-depth topics that we cover once you subscribe to the masterclasses. And our social medias. You've got Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Check us out there as well. All right. I will say thank you very much to you, Scott, for joining us. Thanks for bearing with the technical difficulties. It's unusual, and you're the one who had to deal with it. So sorry about that. But thanks everyone, and we'll see you all again next week. Bye-bye.